Thank you. I don't know what that was. Yeah, so that was a track called "In the Face of the Nameless" off Grinding Gears. And if any of you are, does anyone know what Grinding Gears is in here? Okay, that's cool. Basically, when I have gear demos on my YouTube channel, sometimes I'll do a track to go with it. And the guy, this is, in fact, the whole reason this happened was with the NAMM show last year. And this guy came up to me and he's like really annoyed. And he was like, I just want to know why you never put these tracks out that you write for these gear demos. Like, why? And I was like, I don't know, because, I mean, they're not really like real songs. They're just like little demos or whatever. He's like, yeah, but I want to hear them. I was like, yeah, I was like, okay, thank you, you know, I really appreciate that, but I just never really considered it. It's like, well, look, man, like, I seriously think you need to just put these out because people will listen to them, and like, I really want to listen to them. I was like, all right, fine, I will. So then I came back to England, and sure enough, I did it, and then yeah, people seem to dig it. So I guess I'll keep doing them if I've got more gear demos. If I have no more gear demos, and I'm sorry, that would be the last Grinding Gears album. So yeah, basically with masterclasses, stuff like that, I think it's really beneficial if you guys, if there's anything you want to know or talk about, anything like that, it's a cool two-way thing. So this guy already knows what I'm going to say. Anyone got any questions, and we'll just bounce back and do. I've got another track, but we've got an hour, so it'd be cool if you guys got anything specific you want to know that we can talk about it. So you had a question. So I guess with the first one, it was very much a process of this needs a track that's specific to the style of gear it is. So for example, the Horizon Devices Precision Drive, I knew full well that was a progressive metal pedal. So I knew I had to make a progressive metal style track. Or the old guard humbuckers from Bare Knuckle are for more classic rock and hard rock stuff. So I knew I had to make like that kind of track. It never really crossed my mind that I would turn those into like a song that I'd use in any of the bands, but I definitely just saw them as like, I just need to make a demo for this track, and then like for this gear, and then it will make the video cool because it's a great way to demonstrate the gear. Whereas on the second one, I think because I'd already brought out Grinding Gears 1 when I was doing these gear reviews, I was going, well, I know this is going to go on Grinding Gears. So songs like that, for example, my friend Dan, who's at the back there, hi Dan, he works for Neural DSP, and he said, can you make like a disgustingly filthy track to go with this, to show off these amp plugins? And I was like, yeah, I can. So that's what that was, you know, like, and I knew that it would be going on Grinding Gears Volume 2 or whatever. So I guess in that respect, I wanted to make it a little bit extra filthy, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's always with gear demos and stuff. I'm just compartmentalizing it, is what I'm trying to say. I'm just going, that's a gear demo, that's going to be a Grinding Gears kind of thing. I've got other material that I'm actually working on at the minute, which is some of those did kind of start out as just demos for whatever, and now they've turned into proper songs, and they're going to go on another record that I'm going to be doing, hopefully, beginning of next year. I've got a few tracks already recorded, but yeah. So that's a cool question. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yeah. So it's only the one right now. I've been speaking to Tim about doing a single coil to go in this, because it's this guitar that it goes in. And so literally this is the prototype. It's an Alnico 5 magnet. And this is how it sounds on like a high gain thing. The idea is not to be really, really genty, so like you can kind of, depending on the tone you have, you can kind of do or whatever you know that kind of stuff is. But at the same time, I wanted it to be able to, if I had reverb on it, clean up a bit more. It's kind of a less powered version of the bare knuckle Warpig that I used, because the bare knuckle Warpig, every time I had it on a high gain, I was like, this is just the sound that I love. But the issues that I started running into were particularly on stuff that's cleaner. I found that it was a bit too driven, a bit too compressed all the time. It just wanted to break up immediately. So this is kind of slightly scooped in the mids and less output than that pickup, but it's that kind of ballpark. It's not really meant for, I mean, you can play like, hopefully many styles on it, but I definitely didn't want it to just do one thing, if that makes sense. It's a bit more dynamic, even at full volume. You can get a little bit more. It's a lot of reverb, I apologize. I like reverb. Yeah, it's a bit more vocal. You can do a little bit more with it than before. But it's not a million miles away from that kind of thing. So this is still the first prototype. There's a second one being made, which is just refining those things about it that the thing that I've discovered, right, if you play like heavy stuff with humbuckers, when you try and do like a cleaner kind of thing, it has this kind of almost a boxy mid-range about it, like a high mid thing. Like if you're talking like that, it kind of has that tone about it that always kind of annoyed me. And I thought if I pull all that out, it's going to sound great when it's on a low gain or a cleaner kind of thing. But as soon as you go high gain, it's not going to have the snarl that these passive hand wound pickups have. For the kind of music, the more aggressive stuff. And so it's a compromise. That's what I've realized doing this with bare knuckle, or talking to Tim about it, is it's definitely a compromise of like, how much do you want of that thing as opposed to that? And for me, it's a bit of frustration because I don't always want to just play really heavy riffs and stuff. So it's definitely a longer process than I think either of us were expecting. But I think when they're done, they're going to be really cool, especially if we get a single coil going.
Are you planning on kind of taking a similar approach to the new chapter?
Yes. Oh yeah, I did mention that. Yeah, obviously there's an affordable one coming out, but that's very much similar to these. But then the new model that we're working on it's the same shape, but a few different. Basically, it's just a different thing, but it's the same shape. Those pickups will hopefully go in. But that is one of those things that I think quite a few people on the internet have asked why the bare knuckles don't come in these guitars. And the answer was genuinely like, well, it'd be really expensive because you're adding an extra 250, 300 quid's worth of pickups to a guitar. It's not exactly going to be like, you're not going to save money if you buy it in the guitar, so to speak, because of how it all, I don't even know how it works, but I was just told, people would complain. But either way. Has anyone else got any questions? Yes? So the question was, does learning stuff by ear and just learning records and stuff like limit you overall? I think it's a really good question. I learned by ear like all my favorite records, like Extreme. I started on Metallica and then went to The Darkness, which is great band, great guitar players. And then I went to Extreme and then got obsessed with like Nuno's playing and like learned as much of his kind of nuances and articulation and phrasing styles as possible. And I think that a byproduct of learning someone else's play style is you also learn all the techniques that they know how to do their stuff with. So you end up like gaining this like tool belt of different things you can do. But I think that the fundamental, there are kind of two avenues. One is if you go down the creative route and you start going into writing more and stuff, like writing music and riffs and all that kind of stuff. I think you don't necessarily need to have all the technique under your belt. I think if you want to be a technical player, there's still definitely an element of musicality that you need to like pay attention to. But I also think that it requires a different kind of mindset as a guitar player. For example, if I hadn't have got really into like Incubus and like Carnival and stuff and decided that I wanted to write music with bands and things like that, I would probably have stayed. I would probably stopped with Extreme and then moved on to the next hardest thing and tried to master those, and then come across, just moved into different genres, but all the technical side of it, if that makes sense. And then it probably ended up like some crazy fusion kind of thing. It's kind of weird, because I like sessioned Extreme for ages, and I learned a load of those solos. I found that I was quite articulate. I was quite able to just play a lot of stuff, just because it required so much like dexterity and like, you know, nimble fingers and that to pull it off. And there's a lot of dynamic in that stuff, that I was able to get my hands around a lot of other things. However, I think it comes to a point now, technically for me, if I listen to a guitar song and I really want to learn how to do that, I will just sit and I will just go over it and over and over and over it, again and again and again until I get it down. Where it changes, I think, is that you start to learn more melodic stuff. So you can be given exercises that will be a certain picking pattern. As soon as that's in your muscle memory, you've got the picking pattern down. But if you then take that same pattern or that same muscle memory and apply a different mode or like scale or whatever to it, then you've essentially just got a whole other load of vocabulary you can use on the guitar. Like I could play the same, for example. I wish this would be a little quiet. He says bring an 100-watt amplifier into a Masterclass. So I could go, what would be good? Like that, or I could go. All three would fit actually into a different. Well, actually, no, the first two were the same, but the third one would have been a diminished lick. And depending on where you put that, over what chords you put that over, you're in a completely different melodic world, you know, from pentatonic. So really, it's not necessarily about all that and how many different sort of licks you can do. It's the kind of melody and harmony that you put over those things. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay, cool. Scales and modes that I gravitate towards. I think when I sit and go, I never sit and go, I'm going to play in Phrygian dominant. You know, I never do that. Rob is definitely more in that camp, and he will then pick up on stuff and go, oh, that's what you do a lot of. And so my answer would have been, apparently Phrygian dominant is the one that I use a lot. If I'm doing a lot of the melodic stuff, the like ambient stuff. It's kind of like natural minor, harmonic minor, and then some of those major thirds, like, which is the Phrygian dominant thing, because it's got the flattened second in there and then the major third. When I'm on my own, yeah, that's generally what I do. Is I play a lot in that kind of. I just like the way it sounds. But more so when I'm trying to write stuff with like Tosca, for example, I start, rather than it just being singular notes, I'll start trying to put it into chords and just making them up, you know, like they're definitely chords that exist in the world of music, but I don't know what they are. Like, I have no idea what that chord is, but it sounds cool, you know. It's like when we did A Tall Order. I don't know what those chords are or if they even work harmonically in a progression, but to me it sounded really cool, you know. Same song. There's definitely a chord progression going on there. And it's kind of halfway between playing chords and playing a lead, in the sense that I'm really not playing a lot of notes to make up a chord, but you can kind of hear it is a chord, if that makes sense. So that's generally, it's a combination of all that. If I'm just sitting trying to be creative, it starts out as just noodling. And then I might add an extra note. And suddenly I'm stacking and stacking and stacking until something kind of pops out, and then it becomes a chord progression. And then, I mean, to be perfectly honest, yeah, I do. I think particularly if you're going into writing your own music in a band application, you know, that because there are so many genres and subgenres of bands now. You could go, yeah, we're post-alt rock, emo or whatever, like, you know, we're like death trap, or I don't fucking know. But the point is that, like, there are so many different offshoots of music that it kind of is a blank canvas every time. And so I think it's way more important to just come up with stuff that sounds cool to you rather than by following it by the book. And what's really interesting is I spend so much time in bands in a drop tuning that when I go to a standard tuning, I start playing like all the chords and stuff that I know, all the stuff that's like by the book. It's really weird. As soon as I get the Strat out, for example, or the Telly, and I start jamming with Pete, it's suddenly like all these chord shapes and stuff. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even know I knew this, you know. And so it's almost like, even with a different guitar, like you might pick up I don't know, whatever you've got, like an Ibanez with double humbuckers, 24 frets, and it'll make you play a certain way, then grab a Telly, and it's something completely different. I think that's just as valid as, you know, following rules or, like, you know, finding your own voice. It's the same thing with the guitar. Someone like Stevie Ray would have sounded way different on like a baritone Jackson or whatever than he does on a Fender Strat, let's be honest. So, yeah. Lots of questions. This is great. Yes, sir. How do I visualize the fretboard when I'm improvising? Definitely, I know that Rob, for example, this is good to bounce off. Like with Rob, he would go up and down like this. He could go and then down this way, and he'd connect like that. For me, I find that I definitely go this way. So it's like, it's fun when you not when you're trying to explain something theoretical. Whenever I'm just improvising, like, yeah, I definitely think about it moving up and down, connecting a bit of this shape with a bit of this shape, and I'm not even consciously thinking shape. I'm just going like so. Like I've suddenly got up here and I've not really thought about what position I was in or anything like that. I was just kind of just playing over sort of pathways that I'm familiar with that I'd not necessarily play the same every time, but it's the same pathway every time, if that makes sense. And somehow I'm up here. Do you know what I mean? I guess you'd class it as broken scales, I think. Like, for example, that major thing that I did. That's a major, like, I don't know what you'd call it, but... And then it's like two... I'm really bad at, like, theory, so I know that it's two parts of, like, a major sounding thing. But yeah, definitely move up and down like this, like that. I know that much, like, because I think if I was just to stay, I've already moved up to a different shape. Do you know what I mean? I can't stay in one place. It's become too much of a habit to just move up and down. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, cool, good, yes. So I guess that's kind of mapping out the whole creative process from my perspective. When I'm doing the grinding gears thing, I wouldn't. It literally just is section by section because it's just me. So I have to go. Here's a cool riff. Sometimes I'll put all the riffs together, and then I'll go and track the drums in on the electric kit, and then overlay the bass, and then that's basically it. Tosca, there's no way. It's really, really hard for Tosca to write music if we're not all in the same room. Even though, like, I can just kind of map out a song in my head for Tosca, it has to be with Ben and Dave, just because, I don't know, it's just a weird, different mental perspective on how we'd go about crafting a song. Like, I kind of preempt the kind of thing Dave or Ben would suggest musically, and I think that in itself is going back to picking up that guitar for that style or that guitar for that. It's the same thing with the writing. So I definitely have to write in the room together with those guys to make Tosca work. Dorje is a little different in the sense that it can literally just be Rob and myself can just bounce riffs across from each other, and I'll just lay down demo drums and bass and we'll have a song, because really it's about the chord structures, the structure of the song itself, and the lyrics, really, because there's vocals in that. So it's a little, I wouldn't say it's more basic, but it's definitely a little bit faster and a bit more formulaic to write with Dorje. Was that?
Yeah, and then it was just when it comes to tracking the band stuff.
Oh yeah, when tracking.
Yeah.
With the band, so we did the drums and bass, part live, part separate track, depending on the song, because sometimes we wanted all the room to be on the drums, for example. I'll always track afterwards. I mean, there's one track on the new record that was live, and it was an improviser. We just jammed, and that's the title track of Fire by the Silos, with the spoken word over it. That was just a jam, because I thought it'd be cool if we just all set up in the same room. It was after we'd done all the main tracking, we stripped everything back. I think Ben just had like a kick, snare, ride, hi-hats, and then I had a rig like this, and Dave had his, and we just sort of jammed out a thing, and then that's what that was. But when we're actually tracking the record, yeah, I definitely prefer to start building it up, because I think that's where you can hear pockets of ideas that just spring to mind. So if you do a live record, it's a really, really good thing. But I think particularly with stuff like Tosca, I hear a lot of other stuff that happens after the fact that I kind of compromise if we did it live, straight out the gate, do you know what I mean? Each their own though, you know. I don't know how much I was talking into the mic, how much it's going to pick up. I just realised that. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Yes, any more questions? Yes, sir. Well, I definitely enjoy it. I guess I wouldn't necessarily know if I have to work harder than someone like Slash did, because I've not been in that position. However, judging by, what you see, I would say, it's hard work, but I wouldn't necessarily say, he just has to worry about, say, someone like Slash, for example, touring, playing, and I think that the struggles come from being away a lot and all that kind of stuff, and being run down, being on the road a lot is, even a 3-week tour or whatever minimum is still enough to make you feel like, oh man, I'm tired. You know what I mean? So I can't imagine world tours for months and months for those guys must have been pretty intense. Even if you've got the best catering and the best hotels, it's just going to bring you down. I think I definitely had so my vision of my to be a guitar player looked like probably more like that. When I left school and left Leeds College of Music before coming here. And it wasn't until I met Rob that he was like, this is actually how you can go about making a living as a guitarist nowadays. And it was totally down to him to sort of go, this is what you need to do. Write a checklist, make a YouTube channel, start making content, do this, that, and the other. And if people like what you do and you're proactive, then it kind of just, you never know, it might work out, might not. But I think, he was pretty confident that something would come off if I just stuck at it. And yeah, it kind of has. I've realised that, yeah, it's a really cool thing to do. Because you get to be creative in many other areas. I never thought I'd be able to make edit video. I had no care in the world for editing videos before, but it's a lot of fun. Or audio engineering and all that stuff. But then on top of that, getting to meet people, connect with people all the time. the fact that, I mean, how many of you are here because you know of me from like YouTube, for example? Yeah, there you go. Do you see what I mean? It's like, that's amazing, thank you. But it's mental, really. Like, it's that exact thing. Some guy came up to me in the venue, he's like, how's your elbow, man? Like, you all right? I'm like, I don't know you, but you know that my elbow's, in pain. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered your question fully, but it's definitely a different landscape now, and not just for guitar players, for like bands. I think if you really want to be a band that start, really making it, you've got to pay attention to the fact that social media and that side of it is more relevant now. Like, major record labels will pay for distribution, pay for your record, give you an advance, then they'll want all the money back after they've fucking bought all that stuff, which is great in the immediate, but then suddenly you're like, shit, we're not really earning any money, and we've been on the road for 2 years, and we've released 2 albums, like, what's going on, And I think if you've got social media, you're connecting with your fans immediately, so if you put out a record, you know full well if they're going to buy it, or they're going to support you or come to a show, because they'll tell you, and then you see it, I think that's the difference, and I think it originally came from gear companies not catching on that was a thing. That actually we should be looking at YouTubers because, they're connecting with people that might buy the pedal that we're trying to sell, rather than magazines. That was the first one to go. And then I think, like press companies and stuff, like I got contacted by Metal Hammer to do like coverage for the Golden Gods Awards or whatever it was. I think it was Golden Gods. Because they realized that the subscriber base that I had, for example, was more than they were getting in certain regions in the country on their magazine. It's like, and I'm there going, really? Fucking hell, that's mental, but that's apparently the facts. And I think now bands are starting to catch on that the more proactive they are, it's not about like, hey guys, we're on the road, it's nothing like that. It's just drip feeding what you're up to all the time so fans can actually be fans. Do you know what I mean? I kind of think it's a shame as well in a way that like there's a bit of mystery taken out from bands. Like when I was younger and you'd watch like your favourite bands on TV, you just imagine what they were like as people, or like what they ate for breakfast, or like, like what their back garden looks like, I don't know. Just be like, that's so cool, I wonder what they're like, it'd be so cool to hang out with them. And now I think, if I'm a fan of somebody, then I can almost meet them and get to know them on that level is kind of weird, like, at least from my perspective, but it's a beautiful thing as well. I'm just contradicting myself constantly. Good question. Yes, you're at the back there. Yeah, so in fact the last time I was in ACM, I was in this room. That was the last time I was in this building doing a final performance with Tosca. Since then, so after ACM I moved to Brighton with like Ben, Dave, Rob, Matt Hornby, who works with Chapman, and a bunch of other guys. We all moved down together because we all lived in Guildford. And literally, I think Rob said, I know you've just left uni, so like I'll put you up in my house for like however long you need, which was really fucking sound of him, Like, so I stayed there for about 6 months, rent free. He like sorted me out. He's like, look, just find work and basically try do that. So I just started making YouTube videos of gear that we had in the house that we'd both collected, like JVM settings and like pedals, what we found in the cupboard and all that kind of stuff. The guitar of the day stuff. And just started making loads of content, and they started emailing people. That's when I got to know guys like Strymon and Boss, because with Strymon, with the Big Sky, I really wanted to review it, but I had no way of getting in touch. And then I found contact information for like social media. There's a guy called Ethan. So I just like emailed him like, hey man, really like your pedal, can I review it? No reply. Following week, hey man, really like your pedal, can you review it? No reply. 7 weeks later and 7 emails later, I finally got a reply. Just every single week I said the same thing until he replied. And I just wasn't going to stop until he was like, go away, stop emailing, or like, yeah, you can. And sure enough, he was like, yeah, if you want to, yeah, totally. Like, thanks for constantly emailing me. Because my friend Matt, who you might know, who works with Chapman Guitars, he said what did he say? It's always possible. I forget exactly how he worded it, but it was something along the lines of, there's always a possibility of a yes unless they say the word no. And that has always stuck in my head, just like I will always ask and ask and ask and like just see. And if someone goes no, then at least I know I'm, you know. But yeah, in terms of the stuff I did after ACM, just lots of playing and YouTube content really. That was what got me off the ground, just making loads of YouTube videos and then seeing where that went. Yeah. Sorry, it's not more in-depth answer. Like, I totally know that feeling, but it's really interesting that that happens a matter of years later. So a great example would be, so in a song called Prayermonger, Tosca, which the section that goes... So that's in 5/8. But that was actually from that chord progression was from a song called Fear No, which we played in the final performance in this room, that went like this. All I did was just change the rhythm to... And that was purely because we knew we weren't ever going to use that song again. And it fit, and it was just like, something in my head went, that's the one to put in that song. That's a really good example of that. It doesn't happen in weeks or months, it seems to just be a year's thing. But generally, if I get a good riff, like if something catches on that I like, then I'll just sit with it and keep working on it until I've got... A lot of those Grinding Gears songs, that's why that happened, was because I'd find a cool riff, and then I would like... And this is a really good bit of advice for anyone that's like trying to write music or get stuck or anything. A lot of those songs are a prime example of what happens if you stop the writing session and then try to come back to it a few weeks later, because often that spark that you get in that one sitting, you churn out a tune of what a minute and a half's worth or 2 minutes that ended up being a Grinding Gears track could have been a full song, but because at the time I was like, oh, cool, that's good for now. Yeah, cool, put the guitar down, go off and do whatever else. Come back to it, I'm like, oh, it's gone, you know. But what's left is good enough for all that stuff, you know. And that's something me and Matt, again, were talking about recently, is like I've been making a concerted effort to, if I get a riff or a chord progression, I'm just going to stay until it's done. Even just the guitar idea, until I've got a song's worth, and then I know that that's in the bag, and I'll worry about drums and bass later or whatever else. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Kind of just spitball it, like I'll just throw it against the wall and see what comes back, if that makes sense. Like I did a video on this. It was like my approach to writing riffs, and I started out... I don't know why it makes that sound. I had a riff that went... I literally just did that off the top of my head. I was like, here's the thing. Ended up being in 7/8, which I didn't plan on it being. But then I was like, how do I make it more interesting? So it will start with something quite basic, which was that. And then I was like, if I elaborate on that, what can I do? So, or something like that. I'm just throwing my hands around, just with the same rhythm actually with this hand, but just seeing what comes out, and then stuff sticks. Do you know what I mean? Generally speaking, there are times where I will make an effort to do something rhythmically different. Sometimes it's easy to fall into that that trap of just doing the same kind of the vibe all the time. But one way I guess tried to work to make sure that doesn't happen as much is I kind of approach riff writing sometimes like it's a lead thing. Because if I'm jamming over something on lead, it's not a consistent stream of notes in the same rhythm. Do you know? It could be small groupings of notes because I'm trying to make it interesting as a lead part, but that sometimes works really well for a riff. Case in point being because it's really jagged and weird, and that's kind of what I do when I'm like playing lead over something. I don't think I've got any kind of groove that I could play over. So that would be an ideal, wouldn't it, if I was that prepared? But basically, okay, what might be a cool idea is if you all clap. So if you go like 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So I might go. So do you get what I mean? Like that for me, I'm just rhythmically just jamming around over a pulse. Any of those kind of little groupings of rhythm could have been taken and extracted, the rhythm of it, and made into a cool riff. And that's kind of what happens in there. Like, that's generally what happens, if that makes sense. So I guess the point I was getting at is maybe try it from a lead perspective. If you were ever going to try to write a little bit of lead over something, go, oh, well, that was a cool rhythmic lick I just did. Let's just take the rhythm of it and apply it to some lower notes and chords and see if I come up with a cool riff. Yeah. Any more? Yes. That's a great question. Chords. The biggest one, chords. For so long, all I wanted to do is just be like, for just as long as I could, that's all I wanted to do. And my mate Vinny, who actually came to ACM as well, he'd always spent time on chords. And even at the time, though, it was like I didn't slap myself in the face and go, do what he's doing. I was still the one going, yeah, but... and he was the one going, yeah, well, that's cool, but like, and he'd start jamming some chords for me, and I would shred over the chords that he was... And then I realised it after, like, he left, moved to Australia for a bit, was... Man, like, he was really good with chords, and that's something that I really wanted to get my head around and had for a long time. And actually, one of the things ACM helped with for me the most was identifying the chords that I'd kind of learned, like not knowing that was a major 7, for example. I would have no idea, but I knew it as soon as someone went, let's play major 7. I was like, cool, I know that one. There's things like that. So that was the biggest one for me, is learn chords in a traditional sense, so you major 7s, minor 7s, diminished, augmented, all that kind of stuff, and then start adding your like flat 5, add 9s, all that kind of stuff, because it's really helpful. Intervals being number 2, because in my mind, and this might be somebody who's really good with theory might correct me, but for me, all the chords that I hear all the intervals stacked on top of each other to make the chord. If that makes sense. And intervals, can't stress how important I think they are, because you can get most melodic ideas out by just understanding what the interval is, or understanding someone else's music just by listening to the intervals, and then understanding, oh, that's really interesting that they did that. That's something that I rely on 99% of the time is intervals. And then if I can't work out a chord, I'll rewind it and listen to it, and my ear will go, where's the root? And it finds the root, and then it finds the next highest note, and the next one, until I've built it in my head. And then the shape might be like some weird shape. And then afterwards I'll go, okay, what's a more convenient way of doing that? But the initial thing is what are the intervals that are being stacked up there? So yeah, chords, intervals, rhythm, hands down the most important thing for any musician. Not just guitar, but rhythm. Like how many guitarists I've seen that are incredible, but you give them like what we did a minute ago, where you were clapping and you just wanted to keep them to lay it down in the pocket, and then they can't do it, because they haven't practiced it. Or just getting a drummer to sit and like how many drummers I've seen that can't play along to a click, which is you're the timekeeper for the band. You know, that's the thing you've got to be able to do. You know, it's really important to have rhythm, to keep time, be tight. So yeah, chords, intervals, and rhythm, stupidly important in my eyes. Above all else, like, if I was told that I could never shred again, but I could understand the intervals wholeheartedly, I could play any chord I wanted to, and I was tight as a rhythm player, I'd be like, fine, I'll take that. Do you know, genuinely. So those are the three things I would say. The starter kit. That was a great question. How many? Let me just. We've still got some time. We're good. Yes, sir. With the glasses. One thing I've learned recently about, like, not recently actually, in the last couple of years, is ducking as a parameter that you can use, which basically means, and it's described as loads of different names, but ducking in reverb and delay terms means it just drops out a little bit when you start playing initially. So it allows the first notes that you play to come through, so it doesn't get too clouded. I think I unintentionally dial in reverbs and stuff that are quite dark. Like, there's not a lot of zingy kind of top end on that. It's almost like it's like a big warehouse or something, which wouldn't sound really bright. So it means the guitar is a naturally bright instrument. So it literally just sits underneath everything I'm doing. See what I mean? And it's the same with delay. There's not loads of brightness on that at all. So that when I do all the brightness comes from the initial notes. That's, I think, what I end up doing across the board without really knowing I'm doing it. And one of the reasons one of the reasons I still use Strymon above all other is because I find them to be the most satisfying at doing that. I've used a lot of reverb and delay pedals over the years that I've been doing stuff on YouTube, and a lot of them are very good. But I find it a lot, and maybe it's because I know the gear better than the other stuff, but I find that the way their reverbs sound for the kind of playing that I like to do, the ambient stuff, it does stay out of my way. And there isn't a ducking parameter on here. So I think it's just that you should all buy Strymon pedals. I think it's just that find a reverb sound, get your low pass on, like, just start pulling out that high end. I think you'll probably find, it doesn't matter what you use, whether it's a Hall of Fame, the RV stuff from Boss. Like, I generally do that. I can even vision it in my head now when I'm on the operating system that you get with the Boss pedals and the tube amp expander. It comes with the built-in reverb, and every time I set up a patch, I go to the reverb and like pull all the tone out, because I don't want to have that. I don't even know what you call it. It's like an electronic-y, it sounds like a ping pong kind of thing that a lot of digital reverbs have, that I just don't like. And I think that when it sounds, I'm not hearing it there, you know. That was one massive Strymon sales pitch, wasn't it? That wasn't the intention, believe me. Yeah. Lose the high end. Let me see if I can. So this will give me the green light when it was at where I had it set. Okay. So this is where it was set, and this is the tone in full. Yeah. There's a difference, quite a big difference. Like. Even though it's still not doing that ping-pongy thing, you can still, there's quite a shh that's sticking, and that would get in the way of the notes when I'm playing. So I generally just avoid it. Hopefully that answered your question. I was going to say as well, like, when you're using lots of gain and stuff like that, can also, one thing I always do, that was probably, really should have mentioned it, was I always put them in the loop. I never ever put delay and reverb in front of the amp. I generally find that, because I like gain in my tones, when I use sounds like this, that was in front, it would just be nightmarish. It would just, I'm sure it might be usable for some genres of music, but for me, it needs to be controlled. So I would always put them in the loop as well. Oh, no, I like a smooth transition. Oh, cheeky crossfade. Yeah, do a crossfade. I like it. We got the 2 cameras. Yeah, so that is. I like a smooth transition, and Ben and Dave can definitely vouch for me on that. Sometimes we'll be in the middle of writing a tune. We're in a section. We got it going, and then I'll go. And they'll go, do you want us to go get a coffee beer? And I'll just be like, yeah. And they'll leave for 5, 10, 15 minutes while Dave will smoke a cig and Ben drink coffee or whatever. And when they come back, I've got this transition. And the way only in Tosca can I say it specifically is that it's an orchestrated thing. So when I'm hearing it, I'm going, oh, I think the band should follow each other or something close to. What's a good example? Okay, so in Congress, so we've got right, and at that point, then the then you got. It's weird when I'm not playing all the time. At that point, that's where the transition starts, and then the transition is this whole thing. That was all the transition to get me into the. Because it would, for me, it sounded too weird going from. It's not that it sounds bad, but it's just a bit too obvious, and so that's basically what happens. They'll go for a coffee, and I'll just think about it, do that, just orchestrate a section. You could even say it was in another section of the song, but actually it's just one big transition. I would even just sack off the concept of what time signature you're in and just think about it more like a guitar line. For example, another one would be in a tall order. That's literally what that is, just me going. That whole little line, I just thought, oh, that sounds cool. And I wasn't thinking what time signatures are in, anything like that. And then Ben and Dave would follow it. And then suddenly it's this cool band orchestrated section that kind of just flows into the next part of the song. So I would say don't think about bass and drums. You've got this section you've written, you've got that section, you're like, how the fuck am I going to get from there to there? Just sack off what time signature in, other instruments, and just go, let's try write a guitar line or a bunch of chords that might work into that and see if that gets you closer. No worries. Yes. I think you can. I believe you can. I think I definitely couldn't play I still don't think that I can play blues very well or like that kind of soul-y, fusion-y, whatever, all the stuff like that. That's just my opinion. And I definitely couldn't 5 years ago,
How did you get it?
I think because I think I genuinely wanted to, and that's what it is. I remember being sat there going, oh, I wish I could play jazz, or I wish I could be really good at this. But actually, how long did I spend sat down trying to do it? Not at all. I just got envious of somebody that was really good at it, that I couldn't do it. And I think I've gotten more into just wanting to, I really would love to just be able to do a bit of everything. That's my kind of personality. We got 5 minutes. Okay. Let me just, to finish my answering that question, because it's a really good question, I was perfectly happy to be, in my opinion, pretty good at lots of things than a master of one thing. That's just I'm happy with that. Some people want to be the sickest jazz player or the best blues player or shredding guy. But for me, I get so much more satisfaction musically if a bunch of guys that I know are really good at playing like, you know, R&B and soul and stuff like that, that I could jump in and just have a jam with them because it's fun. And that's what, for me, playing music's about, is fun. Like, so my advice would be just actually spend time thinking about the kind of styles you'd like to play, and actually then just sit down and analyze what it is about it that you like, and then start there. And no, I'll hear something like someone did, like a lick or a minute's worth of playing someone did, and go, that is a really nice sound. I'm going to try and sound like that. So I can never pinpoint that song or that song or this song or that. It's always just a bit of that and a bit of this, you know. So hopefully that was a helpful answer. Okay, I've got one more little tune to play. But thank you all very much for the questions. They were really good questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot, and I'll be hanging around, so have a good day.